It was trial and error a lot on my behalf. I would go to like certain banks like Commonwealth Bank, St. George, meeting in the branch, and they would be like, you can't service, because back then I was probably only on like 50 grand, 45 grand, whatever it is. Eventually, by doing all those meetings and having those meetings with those things, and even then mortgage brokers, and a lot of mortgage brokers back then I couldn't get help from because they didn't want to refinance and pull out like 40K worth of equity from one property, etc., because it wasn't really worth their time, which is understandable. Eventually, I came across like loan to value, like figured out loan to value ratios, and I was like, okay, if I can get the valuations of these two properties at X amount, then I figured out, how it's common knowledge to everyone now, the loan to value ratio, how if you can top them up to 80%, release the equity. And then that basically, once I figured out that framework of getting the equity out of these properties, then using it to buy more property, because the first two was basically just from savings. The third and the fourth, which I bought in Brisbane, were basically just by equity that was pulled out of the first two. It was a combination of equity and savings. If I were to start again, do anything different for that question first, I would definitely team up with anyone that is a mortgage broker that has a lot of properties themselves, that has physically done it themselves. If they've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, then they're going to be able to point you in the right direction. A lot of the meetings with the people at the banks that I originally had, they didn't have any properties. I found out later on after the fact. So they're like, no, you should do it this way. And I'm now looking back at it, I'm like, you should have not interrogated them, but find out if they've actually got the right knowledge behind them to point you in the right direction. Because once I started teaming up with mortgage brokers and figuring out more about the finance aspect, I learned the differences between the bank valuations, of course, which I'm sure a lot of people out there would know, like the desktops, the drive-bys, the 4-vals, which ones are going to be more conservative, which ones are going to be more in your favor and lenient. When I started doing a lot of that research and speaking literally with a lot of brokers, they had 5 or 6 or 10 properties themselves, then I would figure out that finance behind the scenes framework where if I can buy a property, even if it's 250,000 back then, and you can still pick up affordable properties like that, might be a unit or a townhouse in Perth now, I can get a desktop valuation, find out what the bank would literally value it at. Because at the end of the day, to me, by trying to scale that portfolio and use the equity from going from 1 or 2 to 5 or 6 or 10, it's really about what the bank will value it at, not about what you think it might be worth, or what about the real estate agent says they might sell it for. If the bank values it then at the price, good enough for them, it's good enough for me. See a property that could potentially get down to 250, and I could see a lot of other sales were higher. It might be an urgent sale, distress sale, bank repo, whatever it is, a time-sensitive manner. And then I figured out that properties that are tenanted usually are harder to sell. I don't believe it's as talked about, as well known as a lot of people think, but people always talk about distress sales, bank repos, all that kind of stuff. In my experience with literally negotiating tens of thousands of properties and buying thousands for clients and myself, if a property is tenanted and it's mixed with that other fact that the seller has to sell pretty urgently, it's going to be very hard and usually be able to get it for a discounted price. A recent example is picked up a property for $350 because it had a tenant in there for the next 8, 9 months on a fixed lease. The seller of that needed to sell in the next month or two. It was not negotiable. They were going through a situation where they had to sell. They had a tenant in place for the next 9 months, and they had 2 other offers on the table for 40, 50, 55,000 more, but they're all from people who wanted to move in and didn't want to wait 9 months. Those special situations mixed with working with a broker that could be yep, this just valued up at, let's say 350 and you pick it up for 250. So you make 100 grand on the way into it, or 30, 40% without even waiting for the market to grow.